They watched from a chamber suspended in the black velvet of space, orbiting a blue-green jewel that had fought and clawed its way to recognition. The council's chamber was neither a court nor a theater, but it bore the gravity of both. Every representative from the civilized galactic species sat in solemn stillness as the holographic rendering of Earth hovered above them, rotating slowly, innocently. At the heart of the chamber, High Speaker Ishan, a bioluminescent elder from the Miracar, unfolded his translucent fronds. "Let it be recorded," he began, voice amplified by thought interface, "that humanity is hereby designated Class 4 sapient, conditional upon continued behavioral evaluation." A wave of whispers, clicks, chimes, and low-frequency pulses rippled through the chamber. For some, it was relief. For others, apprehension. But for the lone human representative standing rigid in her diplomatic shell-suit, it was vindication. Ambassador Kira Holden did not smile. She knew better. The classification was only part of the truth. They'd fought for decades to be recognized, not as a threat, not as an anomaly, not as an accident of evolutionary violence, but as equals. It hadn't been easy. The first contact had gone poorly, 2 vessels reduced to ash by a misinterpreted scan. What followed were years of monitored behavior, controlled diplomacy, and the long, grinding walk toward interstellar acceptance. But despite the Council's decision, despite the data, despite the rituals of formality, nature had already delivered its own verdict. And it was not nearly so generous. Kira's ear implant buzzed gently. "Feed incoming," her AI assistant whispered. Simultaneous update from the Galri Ecological Collective. Subject: Apex Categorization. She blinked to accept. To all monitoring networks, despite political recognition, behavioral ecology analysis confirms the species Homo sapiens remains a Class X apex threat. Non-integrated biospheres have begun evasive patterning. Biome memory signatures indicate reflexive hostility at proximity thresholds. Kira clenched her jaw. It was worse than she'd expected. Not only were humans not trusted, nature itself had labeled them a planetary toxin. Behind her, another delegate, a serenite with coral plating and soft fronds, leaned forward. "Do you feel proud?" it asked, voice gentle but with an edge. "You are now sapient by law. But you terrify the trees." She turned slowly. "I don't feel proud," Kira replied. "I feel inevitable." Back on Earth, celebration was in full swing. Crowds gathered in orbiting cities and oceanside megasprawls. Fireworks exploded in brilliant patterns above London Arcology and the Americas Neo-Grid. Children wore holomasks of friendly alien races, others dressed as soldiers from the first contact crisis. No one spoke of the ecological threat warning buried in scientific bulletins. No one wanted to ruin the party. Kira left the council chamber quietly, bypassing the media drones, ignoring congratulatory nods from more tolerant species. Her path took her through a corridor of living metal, humming softly beneath her boots. As she entered her private quarters, the door sealed behind her with a whisper. "Pull up the Apex Index," she ordered. The room dimmed, then flickered to life with data projections, charts, creature behavior logs, environmental disruption graphs, all showing the same conclusion. Wherever humans went, native life withdrew. On some planets, that meant migration. On others, extinction. Predators avoided them. Prey preemptively fled or went into evolutionary overdrive. Microflora modified their genetic code to resist colonization. Forests stopped growing. Rivers changed course. Even the fungal networks, the quiet, ancient intelligence beneath many alien ecosystems, refused to communicate with human biologists. Nature wasn't just afraid. It was adapting to fight. Her console blinked. A recorded message was waiting. She recognized the encryption, military-grade, EarthGov. Kira hesitated, then played it. The image flickered into view. General Adrian Lorne, scarred and sharp-eyed, seated in a Spartan war room. "Ambassador Holden," he began, "the Council's ruling changes nothing on the ground. We've been informed by 3 colonies that terraforming has stalled. Local wildlife either refuses to cooperate with bioassimilation or attacks our facilities in coordinated ways. You know what that means." She did. Apex signatures. Instinctual repulsion. Collective resistance, even from organisms that lacked a central nervous system. "We need options," Lorne said. Either we make nature accept us, or we remind it why it never had a choice. The message ended. Kira stood in silence, surrounded by the digital glow of conflicting truths. The council called them sapient. Civilizations equals. But nature, raw, ancient, untamed, still whispered something else entirely. Something deeper. Something true. She remembered the first time she saw a forest draw back from her presence. It had been subtle, vines recoiling, birds falling silent, insects vanishing. It wasn't fear. It was memory. Some shared evolutionary intuition screaming, "You don't belong here." She touched the glass wall of her quarters. Outside, the stars shimmered with cold indifference. "Is it possible," she said aloud, "that we are the only species the universe evolved to resist?" There was no answer. Only the quiet whir of systems and the persistent hum of orbit. Then, a new alert flashed. From the Deep Biosphere Research Network. A silent world, Orison 4, had been marked unsuitable for colonization after all native life spontaneously died following initial human contact. No toxins, no pathogens. Just death. As if the planet itself had decided, better extinct than shared. Kira closed her eyes. The council had spoken. But something older, deeper, and far more primal had already cast its vote. And it wasn't done yet. The hiss of recycled air greeted Kira as she stepped onto the orbital shuttle Adamus. Designed for quiet diplomatic transit, the vessel now bore the marks of urgent repurposing. Extra sensor arrays welded to its underbelly, reinforced hull plating patched in uneven hexes, and a crew twice its standard complement. The mission was no longer political. It had become surgical. Captain Juno Markel met her at the airlock, his exosuit half-clipped, a smear of grease across his temple. "Didn't think they'd send you," he said, stepping aside. Kira shrugged off her transit coat and handed it to an aide. "You didn't think EarthGov would ignore a planetary kill zone either, did you?" Markel's jaw tightened. "I thought we might study it before we walked into it." "They're not sending us in to study, Juno. They want us to find out whether Orison 4 was a fluke or a warning." They walked in silence through the shuttle's corridor, where the hum of systems overlapped with whispered exchanges between officers. Engineers checked environmental seals while biospecialists reviewed maps of the dead world. No one smiled. No one wore mission patches. It was as if they feared to name what they were walking into. In the observation bay, the planet loomed ahead, Orison 4. Once emerald and lush, now grayed by some unseen shroud. Clouds hung in frozen silence, and the great coral forests of its equatorial ring lay flattened, as if bowed in reverence or resignation. "Initial scans still show no viral or bacterial agents," Kira said, scanning her tablet. "No radiation. No chemical anomalies. Just silence." "Organized silence," Juno added. Topsoil sterilized itself. Insects burrowed down and died. Even microbial respiration halted within hours of our probe landing. "And there's something else." He tapped a console, pulling up a grainy clip. The footage showed a survey drone descending into a valley. Trees stood upright but leafless. Branches turned, visibly turned, away from the drone. Not with the force of wind. Not with randomness. With intent. "It's coordinated," Kira murmured. "Behavioral resistance on a planetary scale." Juno nodded. "We're not seeing fear. We're seeing memory. Systemic memory. Like the biosphere recognized us." As Kira watched the replay loop, a pang of unease twisted in her gut. She wasn't unused to hostility. As Earth's ambassador, she'd walked into rooms where her species was barely tolerated. But this was different. This wasn't xenophobia. This was exobiological rejection. Down in the main lab, Dr. Nalis Serret awaited them. A xenobiologist from the Emotari, his species communicated in scent and vibration, but had learned human speech for collaboration. "We've reviewed Orison's neuroflora," Nalis said, extending a tendril toward the data display. "The planet is laced with bioelectric networks, fungal cognition nodes, plant clusters that transmit signals. They are not sentient by our definitions, but they are self-aware in a distributed sense, like a planetary immune system." "And we're the pathogen," Kira said. Nalis blinked. "Not a pathogen. An existential rewrite. Humanity doesn't invade, you overwrite. You terraform, restructure, standardize. Planets don't just change, they stop being themselves. Juno leaned against the console. So, what's the working theory? The biosphere resists by triggering mass apoptosis? Killing itself before we can get the chance. No, Naylis said. It's not suicide. It's sacrifice. Every species on Orison participated. Even apex predators laid down and stopped breathing. As if the planetary network decided that death was preferable to assimilation. Silence stretched between them. EarthGov wants a settlement here, Juno finally said, his voice dull. A symbolic one. Even a single outpost. They think this is optics. If we pull back now, we look weak. We are weak, Kira replied, voice low. Weak, in the face of something we never considered. This isn't just about ecosystems. It's about identity. These worlds know themselves. They know what they are. And they know what we make them become. A quiet chime sounded. Shuttle entering descent phase, the system announced. Kira and Juno strapped in beside the science crew. The ship began its slow burn through Orison's thin atmosphere. Flames licked the viewports, casting flickering shadows across their faces. Below, a forest stretched out in all directions, petrified mid-motion. The landing zone had been selected for minimal risk, a flat basin once home to layered flower canopies. Now it was a carpet of gray ash, dotted with skeletal branches. As the ramp descended, no breeze stirred. The silence was not merely the absence of sound, it was the suppression of it. An enforced stillness. Kira stepped off first. The air was breathable but sharp, tinged with a dry bitterness. Her boots crunched on desiccated soil. Around them, the team fanned out in calibrated formation, sampling, scanning, logging. Each movement slow, careful, reverent. No animals stirred. No insect sang. Then Naylis, crouched near a collapsed vine, stiffened. Something moved. Juno raised his weapon, unnecessary but instinctive. Where? Beneath, Naylis said. Not alive. A signal. A trace pulse in the mycelium. Like it registered us. Kira knelt beside him. Can you trace it? Naylis tapped a control on his forearm. Tendrils of scanning light pierced the ground. Yes, he whispered. It's not random. It's a pattern. It's communicating. She leaned closer to the soil, and a flicker of dread passed through her. The pattern forming in Naylis' display was not organic. It wasn't random sprawl or fungal diffusion. It was a symbol. A glyph. Human. The forest, the soil, the network, they weren't just rejecting them. They were warning the next biosphere. Kira stood, eyes fixed on the horizon. Orison, 4 was dead. But its message was alive. The message etched into the earth was undeniable. A glyph shaped in the rough symmetry of human form, formed from the delicate filament of a world's memory. Not painted, not carved, but grown, woven in the chemical language of living things. Kira stared at it, rooted by the crushing weight of recognition. Not only had the planet known them, it had studied them, classified them, and sent a broadcast in death. A planetary will had decided, this species is a contagion. It's still active, Naylis murmured beside her. Low-frequency pulses, pulsing outward. A warning, carried through the mycelial web into the crust. It's not just static. It's calling. To who? Juno asked, rifle lowered but clenched. There's nothing left. The whole biosphere purged itself. Not calling for help, Naylis said. Calling for documentation. This world is archiving. Like the final breath of a dying historian. The signal expanded slowly, like ripples in a still pond, carrying the memory of their presence through the forgotten forests. The rest of the research team moved more cautiously now, each footfall treated as desecration. Data feeds streamed back to orbit, encrypted and delayed by policy, but no one dared look away. Every fern, every petrified stalk, felt like a witness. They set up a perimeter around the glyph site as dusk neared, though Orison's dusk was unlike any other. The sky faded to a bruise-colored gradient without a sun to guide it, only ambient starlight filtered through layers of atmosphere. Shadows fell without origin. Kira sat alone on a fold-out seat, scrolling through council data archives on her pad. She kept returning to a fragment she'd nearly dismissed weeks ago, a note from an elder diplomat of the Shirvan Assembly. Humans are not sapient in the way other species understand the term. They are engines of intention, consciousness made feral. To them, survival is not a condition but an imposition to be outmaneuvered. The council had debated it, laughed even. But now, amid the ruins of a world that had chosen death over coexistence, the words felt prophetic. Juno sat beside her, the cold metal of his shoulder armor brushing her coat. "You look like you've already decided something." "I haven't," she said, without looking at him. "But I feel like something already has. And we're just now catching up." He exhaled, scanning the still woods. "Do you think they'll listen back home?" "No. I think they'll debate the ethics of pushing further, then do it anyway. Frame it as courage. Or duty. Same as always." "No," Kira said softly. "This isn't the same. We've been told no before, Juno. We've been resisted, fought, negotiated with. But this is the first time nature itself has held up a mirror and said, 'You are not welcome.'" Juno leaned back, watching as a drone skimmed the horizon. "So, what do we do?" Kira closed the tablet. "We watch. We learn. We report. And when the Council demands action, we show them what happens when a planet would rather die than let us rewrite its story." Before Juno could reply, a flare went off, silent but searing. The comms lit up. "Captain, Ambassador. Motion detected 600 meters east. Single anomaly. No heat, no organic profile. But moving." They were on their feet in seconds. The perimeter tightened, soldiers and researchers converging with calm precision. Scanners struggled to define the shape, something too cold for life but too rhythmic for debris. Nahlis arrived, his sensory tendrils quivering. The anomaly appeared near the edge of a collapsed grove. A dark structure, upright, vaguely humanoid. Not a being, but a construct. Metallic, spindly, like a totem raised in mourning. The team approached in silence, weapons lowered. It had not been there hours ago. "It's composed of local materials," Nahlis confirmed. "Woven carbon. Biometallic strands. Assembled with precision, not randomness." At its base, symbols flickered, not etched but alive with phosphorescent mold. Kira stepped forward, squinting. "Is that—" "It's language," Nahlis confirmed, scenting in alarm. "Structured. Translated through associative chemical coding. Not planetary. Artificial. This wasn't made by Orison." Juno's eyes narrowed. "Then by who?" The symbols shifted again, adjusting their light, forming shapes and phonemes recognizable even to untrained human eyes. Not a message for the dead. A message for the intruders. Kira's throat tightened as the words resolved. "We see you. We saw what you did. We mourn the world that knew itself, now gone by your touch. You call yourselves sapient. The network does not agree. But it remembers. And others will come. Others will know." The message faded. The totem pulsed once, then went dark. All around them, the silence deepened, thick and accusing. Kira turned to Nahlis. "Was that local AI? Or a remote species?" Nahlis shook his head. "I don't know. But the structure of the message, it's recursive. Meant to be spread. A cautionary tale." Kira stared into the trees. "We thought this planet rejected us. But maybe it just gave us a stage. Maybe Orison's death wasn't just a defense. Maybe it was communication. A signal fire for anyone else watching. And somewhere out there, she thought, someone, or something, was listening." The tribunal chamber aboard the Covenant Ark was silent as the final feed from Orison concluded. Every flicker of holographic flame, every glyph etched in phosphorescent decay, vanished into the sterile light of the Council's deliberation hall. Kira stood alone in the projection circle, her pulse quiet but taut like a drawn wire. The silence wasn't confusion. It was calculation. At the elevated semicircle, representatives of over 30 interstellar civilizations conferred behind inscrutable gazes. The shimmering emblem of the Council of Sapient Concord hung above them, a stylized eye, once a symbol of shared enlightenment. Now, Kira wasn't so sure. Counselor Erelek of the Turnix Collective shifted in his fluid shell. Ambassador Voss, your report concludes that the planetary extinction event was a voluntary termination initiated by native biosystems in reaction to human interaction. Yes, Kira answered. Every piece of data confirms it. The myco-network went dormant by choice, not infection. It sterilized the biome to prevent assimilation. And you're certain, Erelek pressed, that this decision, this planetary euthanasia, was based on contact with your species? It wasn't a virus, not a resource drain, just our presence, our approach, our existence. A murmuring wave passed through the chamber, subtle but unmistakable. A Garuan matriarch clicked her mandibles. This would be unprecedented. It already is, Kira replied. You've all seen the totem. It wasn't just a suicide. It was a message. Something else placed that warning. Something watching, listening. Counselor Vayan of the archivist kin cast his many-lensed gaze downward. Your people were classified as sapient through mutual recognition and technological threshold. But sapience, Ambassador, is not merely invention or intellect. It is restraint. It is reflection. Kira met his gaze. And what happens when the mirror doesn't show what we want? Silence again. Then a soft chime. From the rear of the chamber, a new feed blinked into existence. It wasn't Orison. It was another world. Verdant, untouched, spinning in the slow rhythm of pre-industrial life. Labels flared. Harpax 4. Proximity. 3 jumps from human expansion corridor. We intercepted this yesterday, Counselor Erelek said, voice like still water. A forward unit from a private Earth venture deployed terraforming probes. The planet is inhabited. Sophants, non-technological, but developing cultural markers. Kira stared. That violates Core Treaty 2.7. Indeed. Erelek blinked his inner lid. The humans claim it was an error. Automated systems. A clerical lapse. Orison wasn't a lapse, Kira snapped. It was a mirror. And if we ignore it, we risk classification, Vayan finished. Not as sapient, but as hazard class. Apex threat. The term hung in the air like a guillotine. Juno stood in the observation tier above, unseen by the council but watching everything. He could see the tightening of Kira's jaw, the tremble she forced into stillness. He knew that look. She was being pulled toward something bigger than her, and she hated it. Hated the truth it brought with it. In the crew quarters, Nahlis watched too. His tendrils barely twitched, but his core data flow spiked with concern. He understood now. Orison hadn't just reacted. It had communicated across species lines, not just with humanity but with the greater network. And that message had been heard. Replicated. Distributed. Kira spoke again, slower now. You're suggesting preemptive sanctions. Restriction of expansion. Containment of our kind. Not suggesting, Vayan said. We're considering. The Council is no longer debating humanity's curiosity. We are debating its compatibility. A pause. Then, from an unseen console, a new image, the totem from Orison. The message replays, quiet and cold. You call yourselves sapient. The network does not agree. The words had spread. At least 6 planetary systems had registered similar symbols in recent cycles. No sign of sentience. No sign of builders. Only warnings, etched in alien soil. Kira looked up, voice steady despite the chill behind her eyes. If you cage us, you teach us nothing. You only validate the fear we inspire. But if you let us face what we've become, let us reckon with it, maybe we can change the reflection. And if you fail? Vayan asked. She didn't flinch. Then we deserve to be alone. The chamber held its breath. Then, from the edge of the assembly, a small, quiet voice. Counselor Imt of the Lasari, one of the longest-lived species in the known accord. No other species has faced extinction as often as humans and clawed their way back through myth and fire. That's not a threat. It's a pattern. And patterns, repeat. The council fell into recess without conclusion. But something had shifted. Not resolved, but reframed. Outside the chamber, the corridors were lined with sentients of every shape and chemistry, murmuring, speculating. The galaxy now knew what Orison had said, what it had chosen. Back aboard the far site, Kira stood at the observation deck, watching the slow-turning stars. Juno joined her in silence. "They didn't decide," she said. "They will," he answered. "They always do." She nodded. "I just wonder if it'll matter. The message is already out there." "Yeah. But maybe that's the point. Maybe now we finally start listening." Behind them, the stars continued to burn. And somewhere in that endless dark, the memory of a dead world waited, not forgotten, but echoed.